Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our annual gala. We have had a wonderful response to this event, even though we had to revert to Zoom instead of a live dinner, as the venue booked months ago cancelled at short notice for reasons actually beyond their control. Thank you all for joining us. And I want to thank too our generous sponsors, BB Energy, Bucha Municipal, Peak Scientific and Strethers, as well as many generous donors, too many to name individually. This is a special event, as I want to celebrate with you the news that our CEO, Malik Sabin, is working full-time in the West Bank as Dean of the Arab American University of Palestine, brackets AAUP, School of Medicine, as well as running a top-class clinical neurosurgery service in Jenin. He's already had a big impact on the health sector in both Gaza and West Bank. He only started in September 22, so it's been quite remarkable what he's done already. And we'll hear much more about that this evening. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed this program.
Thank you very much, Colin, and hello everyone. It is lovely to see so many of you back with us for IMET's annual gala. Welcome, also a big welcome to any new faces who've joined us this evening. I know we have a couple of people who haven't been with us before, so you're very welcome. I'm Charles Phillips. I previously served as a trustee for one of IMET's partner charities, Firefly International. So that's my connection here with you this evening. And Firefly, similar to IMET, works with children impacted by war in Palestine and Syria. I'm based in Oxford in the UK, and I've been studying about and traveling throughout the Middle East for the last 10 or so years. So this is a part of the world that is certainly very dear to my heart. So I'm very, very happy and feel very fortunate to be presenting this event this evening for you. We have an excellent lineup of speakers this evening. We've got some top experts who will be sharing insights on the latest situation in Palestine. We're going to be updating you on some of IMET's projects and where support is needed the most. And of course, we have some big entertainment and more on that in just a moment. Okay, so now to move to the first section of our evening, I have the pleasure of introducing IMET's CEO, Dr. Malik Zaben. As Colin mentioned, Malik recently moved to the West Bank. He relocated from Cardiff, where he was working, to Jenin in the north of the West Bank. And Malik works as a neurosurgeon. He's from Palestine, and he's on the line with us from Jenin tonight. Please do bear in mind that electricity sometimes cuts out in the West Bank. And if that happens and Malik drops out, then we'll just move on to the next section, but hopefully all will be fine. So Malik, over to you.
Thanks, Charles, and thanks, Colin, for the earlier introduction. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be with you tonight. And thank you to each and every one of you for being with us this evening at this Zoom event. We are very pleased to be able to welcome those of you that have been with us for a long time, as well as those who are new to our events. It's my absolute pleasure with the start of this evening to introduce to you one of IMET2000 old, probably and new friend. It's our Palestinian voice in the UK, our ambassador to the United Kingdom, Dr. Hussam Zumlud, who could not be with us live, but he's left us with this recorded message. So let's listen to Hussam.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, friends, good evening. It is a pleasure to be addressing you tonight. Allow me first, please, to thank the organizers and the fine people behind IMET2000. Professor Colin Green, Dr. Malik Zaben, Ms. Harriet Paul, and all the countless contributors and leaders of IMET2000. You do vital work, very much appreciated work in many places, none more so than Palestine. This year marks the 75th commemoration of the Nakba, the wholesale dispossession of the Palestinian people in 1947-49. This grave injustice lies at the heart of the Palestinian struggle. It was never redressed, and its consequences are with us today. Palestinians still lose their lives to the violence of an occupying colonial military. We still lose our homes and lands. We are cut off from our natural resources. Whole villages are slated for demolition. Homes are routinely destroyed. We do not merely commemorate the Nakba, we live it. The work of IMET2000 is therefore not just important because of the much needed training and expertise offered to our healthcare professionals. It is important because it is a gesture of solidarity with our plight, a reminder to Palestinians back home that the world does care, that there are those who understand our struggle, that there are those who are willing to help. This is of immense psychological importance in a place where hope for the future is at a premium. The generational trauma of the Nakba is compounded every day by further crimes of this colonial occupation. This is an ongoing Nakba, and with it, an ongoing health emergency. Strengthening our healthcare sector is therefore of vital importance, and the work IMET2000 does in Palestine is of immense support. From first aid training, the Children with Special Needs program, professional development support, and specialist training across Palestine, IMET2000 addresses areas of particular importance for the Palestinian healthcare sector. It is crucial, and for your work, we thank you, and we thank all those who support you. The real cure for Palestine is, of course, political and legal, one based on justice and equal rights. But IMET2000 offers invaluable support to all those medical professionals on the ground who are struggling to keep up, even as they courageously keep fighting. I thank you for being there tonight and every night. I thank you for your contributions to Palestine and many others who are in need. And I wish you every success in your continued endeavors.
Thank you so much to the ambassador for recording that message for us. You'll certainly be hearing in a lot more detail about many of the themes that he mentioned in his video later this evening. So next, I'd like to invite Colin to say a few words about our keynote speaker for the evening. So Colin, over to you.
Oh, first of all, thank you so much to the ambassador. He's always been incredibly supportive to us and turns up at all our events if he can. Of course, he can't always, but we really appreciate his support. It's so important in this country. But now it's my great pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker for the evening, Sir Vincent Feen. He served as British Consul General in Jerusalem from 2010 to 2014. And served the Palestinian cause with great effect whilst there, and also on return to the UK when he set up the Balfour Project as a charity to advocate for Palestine. He is now the vice chair of that charity. In 2011, I think that's right, he had the misfortune of meeting me in Jerusalem when I asked for help, and he has since been a wonderful supporter both of me and of IMET2000 ever since. Thank you so much, Vincent. Over to you.
It's a pleasure to be with you all tonight and an honor to follow His Excellency and my good friend, Dr. Hussam Zomlot. Thank you, Colin, for your kind words. I didn't actually create the Balfour Project, but I was chair for a while. And as you said, I'm now the vice chair. I first met Colin 12 years ago, as he says, when I was Consul General in Jerusalem. To know Colin and his sheer enthusiasm is to love him, though only Liz, his long-time companion, wife, and support, is really entitled to say that. IMET2000 is a team effort. We've already met some of the team, with Dr. Malik Zaben and his colleagues in the field, an energetic board and fundraising team back here, including Harriet Paul, and volunteers who put themselves in the front line in Gaza, and the West Bank, helping with training and medical operations. I must commend Dr. Nick Maynard, whom we'll hear from shortly, who chairs IMET's board and was in Gaza during the recent bombardments. His thoughts and actions then were not for his own security, as he hunkered down, but for the health of the 142 Palestinians stuck in Gaza, waiting for the border with Israel to reopen so that they could get out and receive treatment which might save their lives. I do hope they managed. As Colin and I sipped tea, or was it Tybee beer, back in 2010, I realized that there is a British charity, IMET2000, doing good things in Palestine. Practical things that no one else was doing, complementing and cooperating with other good charities like Medical Aid for Palestinians and Juzur. It was true then, and it's true now, with the 5 projects that Dr. Malik will present shortly. It's charities like IMET2000 and MAP that give our country a good name in Palestine, helping to counteract the bitter memories of the Balfour Declaration, harsh British rule, our abandonment of Palestine and the Palestinians in 1948, the Nakba, and British government shilly-shallying to this day. So thank God for the charities. Thank God for IMET2000. A sentiment shared by my successors, including Diane Corner, the current Consul General, who greatly appreciates and supports everything IMET does. When IMET hands over COVID ventilators to the Palestinian Health Ministry, she's there to support and applaud. We talked earlier about politics and justice. I'm retired, so I can say what I think, having chosen voluntarily for 39 years to say what our government thinks, whatever government ruled the UK. I don't regret those years of service, but I say now that there needs to be a change of mindset on Palestine, Israel, led by civil society and ending with British government policy change to uphold the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people who have been wronged. For me, speak for myself, that change of government policy includes UK recognition now of that Palestinian right to self-determination by us, the UK, recognizing Palestine as a state, which does not preempt any eventual outcome. Recognition will put a stop to our pretense that Palestinians have no right to go peacefully and legally to the International Criminal Court, or even to ask a simple question of the International Court of Justice. They have every right. Recognition of the state of Palestine will mean that we endorse that right in line with international law. Sadly, I don't expect our present government to make that policy change, though I'd love to be pleasantly surprised. If I'm right about that, then the next elected British government must. Yesterday, the Balfour Project ran a conference entitled Human Rights in Palestine, Responsibility and Accountability. 2 key words. Considerable responsibility, historic and moral, lies with us British. The occupying power is accountable for controlling the lives of over 5 million Palestinians who do not wish to be controlled. Except that Israel is not held to account. That too needs to change. The occupation needs to end peacefully, but it needs to end. Let me conclude by coming back to IMET. It does sensible things well, practical things well. Like any decent charity, which it is, IMET needs to prove it is effective in its use of funds to meet a real need. I think all of us on this call tonight will say that it is both effective and doing what's needed, and will use its resources well. So let's give IMET what it needs to do its very necessary job. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sir Vincent. We're honoured to have you here this evening, so thank you for those kind words of support. We're now going to hear from Malik, who is going to introduce some of IMET's West Bank projects and some of the latest updates. So Malik, back over to you.
Thanks, Charles. First of all, let me share with you a video outlining our key activities on the front of life-saving training and some of the important workshops, courses, but also some other scholarships that we have granted over the course of last few months, and certainly since we met you last time. But before we show you this clip, I would like to express my sincere appreciation once again to all of you who've generously supported us. Without your support, none of these projects would have been possible. So let's go to this first clip and watch it together. Well, I hope you've enjoyed watching this clip, which gives you a summary of what we have been up to in the last few months, but also tells you, like Vincent has mentioned in his talk, tells you about where your money went and is going to go. It's all going for good causes and much needed sustainable stuff. As you can see, we don't spend money on infrastructure or anything. It's all going to people, to train people, and therefore we strongly believe that these projects are much more sustainable and will have a stronger impact on the healthcare system in Palestine. Before I proceed to the next clip, really, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our team on the front line in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. But because these videos are now coming from the West Bank, I'm going to name my colleagues, particularly mentioning Fadi, as he's leading our team in the West Bank, alongside Alia, but also Shahd, Motaz, Farah, and also other members of the team who've just kind of left, moving into other jobs, specializing, including Ima and Dr. Fajr. So I thank all of them for the contribution, for the hard work, for the persistence, and above all, for believing in the job they are doing. So thank you so much for your hard work. Next, I would like to share with you, if I may, another clip, this time outlining a set of projects that we have successfully delivered, this time on the front of child mental health in the West Bank. Let's have a look at this clip together.
بشكر أنا باسم جمعية الرياض لذوي الإعاقة الخيرية جمعية IMET على اهتمامها بالجمعيات الخيرية وتوفير الدعم الدائم لهم للاستمرار في عملهم وتقديم الخدمة للفئة المستهدفة لديهم.
شكرا IMET على دعمكم عشان نقدر نكمل الدراسة.
أشكر مؤسسة IMET على المساعدات اللي قدمتهم لنا ولمنحهم لتعليم أولادنا.
شكرا جمعية IMET لدعمكم جمعية الرياض للتوحد اللي احتوت أولادنا.
وبشكر جمعية IMET على اختيارها لجمعية الرياض من ضمن الجمعيات اللي قدمت لهم المنح، وهاي المنحة كان لها دور كتير كبير في استمرارية عملنا في جمعية الرياض.
شكرا IMET لدعمكم لجمعيتنا.
شكرا IMET لدعمكم لأطفال جمعيتنا تقديم المساعدات لهم.
بنتمنى يكون لنا نصيب في المنح القادمة من جمعية IMET. شكرا لكم كثير.
شكرا من كل قلبي.
شكرا IMET.
Well, you've seen this clip now, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for helping us to help these kids, help their families to attend these classes, whether that's for mental treatment or for physical treatment. Really and truly, without your support, none of these projects would have been possible. So thank you so much. And obviously, as you can see, the demand is on. Physical trauma is accompanied by mental problems and mental difficulties, no question. And we bid and really look for more support from you. Now, before I move on, I would like to move on and share with you another short clip, but this time it is a piece of music played by a girl called Shahd Al-Junaidi. She's a young girl from Nablus who played this piece of violin on behalf of the kids of Palestine, with a message from her to all of us. But just to warn you, as the video starts, it will be quiet for a few seconds before it kicks in. Let's watch this together.
Wow. Well, thank you, Shahad, on the violin. That was really lovely to hear. And thank you, Malik, also for introducing those videos for us. It was really lovely to hear those messages from families and children. One point to note is that Sir Vincent, who you heard from earlier, has put his email address kindly in the chat for us. So if you want to learn more about the Balfour project that he's working on, he's left a message, and do please send him a note if you want to hear more about that or get involved. So now is one of the moments that you have all been waiting for. We are very lucky to be joined by entertainer and human rights activist, Mark Thomas. And Mark is IMET's longest serving patron. He's going to be talking to Colin and asking Colin about his ongoing activism over the past 70 years in the Middle East and Palestine. And I hope you find this very interesting. So Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much. Firstly, thank you for joining us all. And I am I didn't know I was the longest serving patron. I think that's mainly because I lost the resignation letter. I do apologise for that. I should have gone ages ago. But look, Colin, lovely to see you. Always a delight. Are you still there?
Yes, I am. Thank you for coming and turning up after so much trouble. We really appreciate that. You can be as cruel as you like tonight, Mark. I'm getting quite used to it.
I can be as rude as I like, did you say?
Cruel.
Cruel? Oh, fantastic. Oh, that's great. Well, I'm glad you said that, Colin, because we're all gathered here tonight because we're fed up of you. And we're just because you're so bloody nice and you are worthy, you're a good man, you're a fantastic human being. You've done more things with your life that are good and worth to this planet than at least 100 of us put together, and you make us look like crap, and we're fed up. We're absolutely fed up, and we thought we'd bring you down a peg or two. So, because honestly, Colin, you could make Mother Teresa look bad. Actually, she's a bad example, but you know what I mean. Now, Colin, let's start at the beginning, okay? Because you've given me a list of things that you thought, oh, I'll get Mark to ask me this, but I thought I'd ask with. I'm going to pepper it with some of my own questions in here as well. Is that all right with you?
Yes, of course. Yes, yes.
Okay, well, let's start with a serious question, Colin. Have you always been sympathetic to the Palestinian cause?
No, quite the reverse. Age 10 at the end of the war, I saw films of British soldiers entering Belsen concentration camp to see walking skeletons in their blue and white striped gowns and lorry loads of naked dead bodies thrown into the back of a truck. That was so distressing that it's informed my life ever since. You never get over that in your life. Then in 1948, at age 13, I started a career in the Royal Navy and went to Dartmouth College, which in those days was incredibly conservative. So my pro-Israel views were strongly enhanced. Not until I went to sea training as a midshipman in the Eastern Mediterranean did I start to have doubts after enjoying my trips ashore in Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, and I really loved walking in the desert. By 1955, the scales had fallen from my eyes, and I realized just how racist the UK was to the Arab world, and President Nasser in particular. I resigned my commission 6 weeks before the wicked and disastrous Suez campaign in 1956. I knew it was coming, and we'd been preparing our ship for it for 6 months, and I disagreed with it so strongly that I had to leave. And the campaign was run by the British with the French and the Israelis to so-called take over the Suez Canal. It was wrong.
Colin, let me ask you, you were a Jolly Jack Tar.
Well, I was an officer.
Can I ask you a very serious question? Can you do the hornpipe?
No, that's
Sure.
too serious for me. I can't.
Because it's one of the things I've always wanted to see you do. Either the hornpipe or the Scottish sword dance. Do you here's a quick question for you. If you had to have an OBE or appear on I'm in a Celebrity, Let Me Out of Here, which one would it be? If you had to do one or the other.
I would consider both horrible things to have to do. I would never accept either.
Well, I mean, if you accepted the OB, you'd obviously have to spend 10 minutes with royalty.
Yes.
Well, you could quite possibly bored to death. But if you went on I'm a Celebrity, you could end up spending 2 weeks with Matt Hancock.
Oh, wonderful. That's what a treat that would be. I would love that.
I mean, we should be grateful that he hasn't killed anyone in the past week, I think. But I want to ask, do you think there's anything positive other than your ability to do the hornpipe? And also the fact
rock and roll, not hornpipe.
You were rock and roll, were you? What was your favorite?
Oh, yes. And the twist. I taught the Africans the twist, but they told me they'd been doing it for 2,000 years, and that put me in my place.
Well, there we are. There's cultural appropriation right there, and it's been thrown right back in your face. So what did you gain from your career in the Navy? Did you
to be honest, not much. I suppose the best thing that came out of it was I developed a bitter hatred of all forms of racism, hierarchies, class consciousness, and snobbery. I put up with them and seen that in the Navy, with rank always dominant over one's normal behavior. I hated it. I had with my own eyes the positive thing, revealed to myself the truth about Palestine. And best of all, I suppose, no, I don't suppose, the best of all was I met my wife, Liz, in Malta.
You met Liz in Malta?
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. Did you ask her what she was doing there?
Oh, she was out there, what we called the fishing fleet, young women looking for naval officers to take them out. Liz wasn't like that, but that was why she was there on holiday with other people.
This is the kind of spicy Jackdaw story that we were after here. I should also ask, everyone thinks that you're absolutely wonderful, and you've been together with Liz for 70 years, haven't you?
Nearly 70, yes.
Nearly 70.
69. 69 come this muck spreading.
And how would you describe her tolerance?
Unbelievable, amazing, and incredible, actually. Since
she told me
you're
it was
getting very private here.
I know, but you know,
I said cruel, not private.
You said to me, ask whatever you like. So
okay, all right.
And Liz did tell me that you've recently had a major falling out.
And we haven't actually, no.
She said it was a very major falling out over radishes.
She hates them and I love them.
So what happened after you met Liz and became disillusioned with the Navy?
Well, obviously that career was on the rocks and I had no clue at all what I wanted to do in life. I just enjoyed getting out in Portsmouth from the ship, an incredible sense of freedom released from the straitjacket of a military culture. I went and worked as a farm labourer and milkman for a year and took enough A-level equivalents in that, it was called higher school cert in those days, in that time to get into medical or veterinary schools. I then made another mistake and chose veterinary medicine and started on a 6-year course in London in 1957. The highlight of my time at university was leading an expedition to Uganda for 3 months in 1962 and actually falling in love with Africa and particularly Uganda. And it triggered my interest in medical research because we were doing quite a lot of research on wild animals, transmitting diseases to domestic animals, in turn transmitting those diseases to man, zoonosis they were called. So that started me off on the research interest.
So is it true that you're responsible for COVID?
I refuse to answer questions like that. You don't have to be that cruel.
I want to know were you when you said you were a milkman, did you actually milk the cows or did you deliver the milk?
Yes, we started at about 5:30 in the morning, got the cows in, milked them by hand into containers, put them into milk bottles, which in those days you could have half a pint in a milk bottle. And the cows we had were Jerseys, which produced virtually solid cream. So the milk bottle would
Did you just sit there with a scone?
Well, having filled the bottles, I had to fill up a very old van, which the bottom was falling out from, and then take them all around Emsworth and Warblington and places in Hampshire to people who complained that they were already sour by the time I got there. And then I had to take them back again and take them back yet again. So it was a jolly time, I must say.
Okay. What happened after that?
Well, after
you became Ernie, according to Benny Hill.
Well, after 5, I graduated in veterinary practice in 1963, early 63. So after 5 years in agricultural veterinary practice, that too became repetitive and I wasn't enjoying it. But luckily, I was invited to join the Medical Research Council to develop new techniques in microsurgery. I was by this time 34 years old, but at last I'd found what I really wanted to do in life. It was all surgical research studying how to stop rejection of organ transplants and how to preserve a living kidney for up to 24 hours. If you don't cool it, it's virtually dead in 1.5 hours and not transplantable. And we got it up to 24 hours successfully. I struck lucky, and very lucky, I have to say, nothing brilliant about this, by testing a fungal product called cyclosporin A, and it proved capable of preventing rejection for years and has been in clinical use ever since. In fact, the dean of the medical school, Nour Shahabi, only died a few months ago, had had his kidney protected by cyclosporin for 25, I think it was 28 years. And he didn't die of a kidney failure. He died of something else. So it was my big break really in life. And I have to admit it was very much good luck. This led to my being invited to start up from scratch and be director of the Northwick Park Institute for Medical Research. I really enjoyed this immensely from 1994 to 2006, even though we had no government or MRC financial support. And it was always a struggle to keep going. But I learned how to fundraise that time. I had to raise the best part of 3 million a year to keep the research going. And we sort of struggled through and managed somehow.
You see, you're too good. Look at you, you've invented something that saved hundreds of thousands of lives.
Well, I wouldn't claim to invent it. The people who invented it were Swiss.
So you stole it, but that's the most important thing, Colin.
Yes, but they then got a chap called Jean Borel to test it on cells in petri dishes, and they were shown to me at Northwick Park and asked what I thought about it, and I said, well, it's possible that this could produce tolerance, which would be only need to be treated the person for a few weeks and then take them off the drug and they wouldn't reject their kidney. But I don't claim having invented it at all. There were a team in Cambridge led by Roy Kahn.
You're so bloody modest as well. You're brilliant and modest. This is why we're
I'm not being modest. I'm just telling you the truth. The guy who really got it into clinical practice and I admired enormously was Professor Roy Kahn, who was the liver transplant expert in the world in Cambridge, and he really got this going, not me.
Okay, well, let's go on to. Let's start to focus in on Palestine. Why? How did you become, or how did you develop a passion? Because you have got a passion for the Middle East and for justice. How did you develop that passion?
Well, I was lucky enough. I think we're running out of time, Mark. I think I can just work through these questions quickly. Becoming director of this institute was a big break in my life, obviously. I traveled the world lecturing on transplantation in, for example, Europe, Asia, Africa, Russia, Ukraine, Singapore, and Scandinavia. I've enjoyed working in Ukraine, particularly ever since. The biggest break in my next career in medical education was when Medical Aid for Palestinians asked me in 1991 to explore the possibility of starting the first Palestinian medical school. This rekindled my fascination with the Arab world and Palestine. After much infighting and resistance, we admitted the first medical students, 32 in number, into Al-Quds University School of Medicine and graduated the first as doctors in 2021. Entirely due to Palestinian Resilience Initiative, there are now 7 medical schools in Palestine and about 3,500 men and women studying at any one time. This is a miracle in just a few years, entirely down to Palestinians. In 1996, we set up a dedicated charity, the Foundation for Al-Quds Medical School, and this has grown until today, very successfully supporting many students in all Palestinian medical schools.
So when did you set up IMET?
We registered in the year 2000. We realized we set it up because we realized that young graduates coming out of medical schools had limited opportunities to expand their clinical skills. So we have put together a package of local training in both the physical and mental trauma, as well as intensive training to international standards overseas in, for example, USA, Gulf states, Middle East, UK, Sweden, France, and other European countries. The first cohort of students are now in their mid-40s and are incredibly successful wherever they have settled. Their success is the greatest source of pride, both my wife Liz and myself. We salute them. Our current CEO, Dr. Malik Seven, you've met tonight, is a prime example of what Palestinians can do if given half a chance.
I've got two final questions for you, Colin, so I'm going to keep them short. When are you going?
Well, I go when I'm too decrepit, cease breathing and fall off the planet, or our excellent board of trustees tell me to go. Meantime, the passion has become an obsession, inspired particularly by a visit to Gaza with my wife and being welcomed with warmth, way beyond anything we'd ever experienced before, and seeing the immense damage wrought by successive Israeli attacks. Similarly, we witnessed the massacre in Jenin in 2002, and the anger it produced in us makes it impossible to walk away. Do we have hope? Yes. Two important realities give me hope. First, the adaptability, high culture, scholarship, steadfastness, sumud, and resilience of the Palestinians is remarkable and will not countenance defeat. Second, I've worked with many courageous Jewish human rights organizations worldwide, including in Israel, and they too are desperate for fair and just peace. That's it. Thank you.
Well, there's one more question, Colin, which I think all of us have wanted to know, which is, do you know any jokes?
No, I can't remember jokes. I always forget the punchline.
Oh, Colin, shall I tell you a joke?
Oh, go on. We've got
all right.
just.
I'll tell you a quick joke
seconds.
just to finish. This is just for you. All right. Well, it's not just for you. It's for everybody. A racist, a misogynist, and a homophobe walk into a pub. And the barman says, "Good evening, officer. Which branch of the Met are you from?" Now, I'll leave you with that. And Colin, I would like to say on a personal note that, you know, I occasionally am quite rude to you, but I utterly love you and adore you and think you genuinely are a wonderful human being, which brings me, I then get cross with myself for saying that, but you are, and thank you.
Well, I'm very cross with you for saying that. I told you to be cruel.
All right, I will. Did you ever get a job? Did they employ you as a milkman? No. I've got a cruel question. Did they employ you as a milkman because you were so small and you could fit under the cow?
That might have been the case, actually. I never thought of that.
Is it true that you ever had a job as a garden gnome?
You are being very cruel now. I'm going to go away.
Well, we love you, Colin, and thank you.
Well, I want to thank you too for being such a supporter, and also remind the audience that you walk the apartheid wall, all 740 kilometers, I think it was, not miles of it, many years ago. And then you wrote a book about it and you ran a play about it. And I went to that, and that's where I really thought you were a great guy. But then you also helped with a little bit of help from us, set up the Jenin Theatre Comedy Club, which has flourished with Sam Beale and yourself running comedy club. Came over here, was very successful, and has been very successful in Palestine. I have to say, I'm even more important to me than just pure medical affairs, which is a kind of sticking plaster on what's wrong already. The real cause, the real thing we should be supporting is a Palestinian culture. And I'm keen on supporting the theatre, comedy clubs, music, very much the music, dance and everything, because I think that's the whole basis of a decent society, and one which will survive whatever is thrown at them in terms of occupation. So I'll end on that. Mark,
Thank you, Colin. I agree with you on all those points, and I do wish you could do the hornpipe.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Colin. I'm just going to invite everyone to unmute so you can give a round of applause if you'd like to. Thank you so much. That was really nice to hear from both of you.
Very good.
Well done.
So we are now going to take a short 5-minute break. It's time for a quick cup of tea. We're going to play we're going to play a piece of music from some Palestinian musicians who are going to be playing songs of the Lebanese singer Fairuz. So just 5 minutes, and I hope you enjoy this, and then we'll be back for the second half. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Welcome. I hope you had a good break. We are now going into our second half of the evening. So we've got more entertainment for you, more project updates. You're going to have a fantastic discussion that you'll hear in a minute. But first of all, it's time to introduce our next entertainer for the evening. Unfortunately, he is on tour at the moment, but we are very lucky to have had a recorded video from comedian Omid Jalili, who many of you will know from TV. He's been in movies and all sorts of things. Omid has kindly helped us before, and he supports IMET's work in the Middle East very much. So we're lucky to have this video. I hope you enjoy.
Big love to Professor Colin Green and everyone at this very important organization that I have supported for many years, and how wonderful that you're keeping up the great work. It's a real honor to make a very small contribution. As you know, I'm doing a big fight right now, trying to help the people of Iran. As you probably know, that Iran have now been assigned by the United Nations to chair the Human Rights Commission in November, which is a very strange thing. It was very comparable to when Tony Blair became the Middle Eastern peace envoy after the Iraq War, which itself was a bit like Hitler becoming the new chief rabbi. I'm really happy to be here because your work shows that we are all one. That's the whole point. We make no discrimination where people, I think medical people actually do the best job because they look after everyone, especially when there are so many things that bring us together, especially in that particular conflict where everyone from the Middle East, you know, whether you're Muslim or Jewish or whatever, we have circumcision. I've been circumcised. I don't think it's a good thing to have 1/3 of my doodah removed as a child. I said this to my therapist. He says, but all Iranians, Muslims and Jews have 1/3 of their doodahs chopped off as a child. I said, yes, but not the third in the middle. I have no idea if that joke is funny. But as it is, I'm really happy to be here. I'm doing a Jewish charity tonight. It's Tikva, which is it's their search for they're searching for Jewish children in need and circumcision fund. That last bit's a joke. So we make no discrimination when we try and help people. Also, I would like to say that it's a real pleasure to, you know, do some jokes with no judgment, especially as now we've had the Chinese comedian who apparently did a joke about the People's Liberation Army. And I tried to defend him, and other people said to me, we don't see you doing any jokes about the People's Liberation Army or the PLA. That's because I changed mine at the last minute to the People's Library of Aberystwyth University. I think that was something I had to do, and the joke worked just as well. I'm not sure, but I think I got away with it. Anyway, it's a real pleasure. I send you all my love. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I'm just sitting here sending love, sending appreciation, and really thank you very much for having me. Enjoy your time.
Thank you, Omid. Really kind of him to have recorded that for us. I know that Colin is really happy to receive that as well. So thank you so much. So moving on now, I'm very excited to welcome the next section that we have for you, the next segment we have for you. We are so pleased to welcome renowned historian, Professor Ilan Pappé, who's here with us live this evening. I think he's calling in from Haifa. This is particularly special for me because Ilan was my professor during my undergraduate degree at Exeter University, and I learnt a great deal from him. Many of you will be familiar with his work and will have read lots of his books. Ilan's going to be speaking with Nick Maynard, the chair of the IMET Board of Trustees. And Nick has just returned last weekend from a mission in Gaza where he was performing surgery. Nick is renowned in his field, and he was operating on patients with some very difficult cases. And Nick was also there, as you've heard earlier this evening, throughout the recent bombing raids So we're very relieved that he's now back safe and sound. And both Nick and Ilan are going to have a lot to share with us. So Nick, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Charles. And Ilan, welcome. And it's a great honor for me to interview you today. The first book of yours I ever read was 10 Myths About Israel. And for the audience, I just want to read out some of the quotes on the cover of that book that have been attributed to you. You've been described as Israel's bravest and most principled and most inclusive historian, one of the most prominent Israel political dissidents living in exile, one of the few Israeli students of the conflict who writes about the Palestinian side with real knowledge and empathy. And another one, the most eloquent writer of Palestinian history. I think those quotes speak for themselves. You, of course, had a very distinguished academic career in Israel before you left in 2007. Can you tell us about that part of your life and how that informed your views about Israel and Palestine?
Yes, thank you, Nick, for your kind introduction. And I want to thank IMET2000 for inviting me. And I'll get straight to answer your first question. My life in Israel since childhood was quite a typical trajectory of an Israeli Jewish boy born to a European Jewish family in Israel, which means a certain socioeconomic background and a certain comfort zone, if you want. So I would say that until I was in my early 20s, I was not aware of the things that I would be aware of later on. And I think that participating as a young man in the 1973 war was the first station in a long journey that has other stations in it that eventually took me out, if you want, out of my comfort zone, and also out of the embrace of my own society. Until that moment that I began to challenge publicly and openly as a professional historian the narrative that Israelis tell themselves and the world about their history, until that moment, of course, life was quite ordinary. But the moment you are challenging, and the challenge is, at least outside of Israel, being accepted, as even being welcomed by the Palestinians later on, you are facing a tough moment because you are treated at best as a traitor and at worst as a nutcase. Life, I would say, more or less since the beginning of this century, became quite difficult in terms of relationship with my university, the Ministry of Education, my own extended family, and so on. And eventually, in fact, I was forced to leave my position in university. And for a while, I was kind of haunted as kind of an enemy of the state. So it's a journey of awakening. There isn't one moment of epiphany. There are stations that eventually you cross the Rubicon, so to speak, and you can't go back, and you never feel sorry about it.
So perhaps a great example of that might be your involvement in the Katz controversy, that your support of Teddy Katz's thesis about the massacre in Tantura, which I think probably was certainly controversial. Perhaps you could tell us about that, and maybe how much that, or in what way that contributed to your decision to leave Israel.
Yeah. Teddy Katz was a student of mine at the time when I started both to research in the various archives the history of 1948, and with some other historians began to seriously challenge the Israeli version of events in 1948. I probably went further than most other historians who were critical by calling what Israel did in 1948 ethnic cleansing. Katz was one of the postgraduate students who was encouraged to look more forensically at some of the cases in 1948. And he chose to look at few villages south of Haifa to see what happened in them in a more focused way. And he came across both documents and evidence that a massacre occurred in one of the biggest villages south of Haifa, the village of Tantura. And unlike other massacres in 1948, this was not a known massacre. I mean, of course, the people who were victims of the massacre and the relatives and so on wrote about it was known to that group of people, but it was not as known, let's say, as the Deir Yassin massacre that everybody is talking about. And to make a very long story short, he, after claiming that there was a massacre in his master dissertation, he was sued by the veterans of the unit that he claimed perpetrated the massacre. And under the pressure of the university and his family and his inner closer friends and so on, he, for one day in the court, broke down and confessed, which was a false confession, that he falsified the evidence about Tantura. A day later, he apologized, and one should say he also had a stroke a few days before, so he was not totally focused as well. But the judge did not allow any retraction. The university then began very cruelly to disqualify him, and I was probably one of the only ones who, not only in Haifa, in the only Israeli academia, that was appalled by this treatment. And when the university decided to begin disciplinary actions against me and created a special court to judge me because I had tenure, it's not easy to expel a lecturer with a tenure, so you needed a special court. In the indictment, my support for Katz and my condemnation of the university and its policies played a very important role in the decision to pressure me to leave the university. And eventually, the pressure came from the Ministry of Education, and I had to leave not so much the country as well as the university. I left the country for a few years because the threats, the death threats on my family, I had two very young boys at the time, were very serious, and I was afraid about them, and therefore I left for a while and came back here and there. As you know, I'm now in Haifa talking to you.
There's been subsequent documentaries about it. Do you feel vindicated now? And do you think the truth is now widely accepted, or do you think there is still a lot of resistance to the truth behind this?
I never looked for a vindication. I think what is important is, of course, that first of all, for Teddy Katz, I'm glad that the films that came recently vindicated him, which is important. I didn't need a vindication. I always felt very confident in what I'm doing, and I was always rewarded by the friendship and solidarity with the Palestinians. I didn't ask for anything more. I'm still not asking for anything more. It's a half vindication because Palestinians were saying what I wrote and what Teddy Katz wrote for many, many years. It's a bit tragic, but when the victims of a crime report a crime, usually they're not believed. But if the criminal at least admits to the crime, then suddenly the crime becomes a fact. And I think that's what happened here. And I think that's why so many Palestinians are a bit annoyed by by the film and so on, because it's not news for them. It's not news for them. And somehow the word kosherizes, so to speak, the Israeli narrative, the Palestinian narrative, if Israeli historians support it, not if Palestinians historians. So I think this is far more important to say. But yes, I think it's important, as is important the United Nations decision on the 15th of May to finally, after 75 years, to commemorate the Nakba. I think, yes, these things are small small victories, because the Palestinians cannot expect a big one in the near future. But these are small victories, which hopefully one day would turn out to be a part of a much bigger victory and liberation.
So I want to just talk a bit about some of the recent events in Gaza. And you wrote in the Palestine Chronicle just the other day about the recent bombardment and pointed out that the West has been silent about it, as indeed they have repeatedly been silent over the last 75 years. And certainly this is something I've noticed whenever I'm in Gaza. What's being reported in the Western media is very, very different to what I'm witnessing. Why do you think the West, and by that I guess I mean the Western governments and the media, why have they been so silent about what is happening in Palestine?
Yes, it's a very good question, because especially nowadays, it's inexcusable, because nobody can claim that you don't know, or you don't have people who can tell you what goes on. I mean, maybe 75 years ago, it was a bit more difficult to know what was going on. But what goes on now, I think that there is not one answer to all the Western countries or the global North. I think it depends who you're talking about. In the United States, the silence is the result of the mixture of the various lobbies that disallow a moral position of the United States over the question of Palestine, whether it's the pro-Israeli lobby, the Christian Zionist lobby, the industrial military complex, and of course, the American imperial policy altogether was always based on the question that morality is a problem only if it is violated by those who refuse to be our allies. I think in the case of Europe, it's a bit more focused. I think Europe never dealt with its Jewish problem properly. I think Israel and Zionism allowed Europe to escape any serious discussion of what happened in the continent in the Second World War. And we're still, I think, impacted. We are impacted by this to this very day, because Zionism was the solution for Europe to absolve itself from dealing for what happened in the continent by supporting the colonization of Palestine. That was the deal. And I think this still impacts European silence about Israel. It's not ignorance. I think people know what's going on, always knew what was going on. So it's a kind of thing that it's very easy to silence European politicians, including in Britain, by accusation of anti-Semitism or Holocaust denial, which both accusations are ridiculous when people, genuinely criticize a racist and oppressive policy. So I think the West has still a problem with anti-Semitism, but it's very interesting that it deals with it by lending an exceptional and almost unconditional support to the Israeli victimization of the Palestinians. And this is something that neither Israelis or Palestinians can solve. This is something the West would have to be brave enough to untangle and start, retracting back to policies which are based on moral values rather than guilt complex and cynical interests.
It's a fascinating dilemma. Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question. I think we could probably go on for hours, but I'm afraid we're running over. You've consistently said, I believe, that a one-state solution is the correct solution to the Israel-Palestine situation. Is that still your belief? And perhaps you could expand on why you think that and what you believe is the right way forward.
Yes. Yes, I'm part of a group of mainly Palestinians, and as you can imagine, a small number of Israeli Jews who are part of something which is called the One Democratic State initiative. We believe that whether we supported it in the past or didn't support it in the past, we believe that the two-state solution is dead for all intents and purposes. And actually, everyone who lives between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean is already living under one state. It's one apartheid state, which has a matrix of legal regimes for different groups of Palestinians. But all in all, this state controls every part, including Gaza. If it wants, it can tighten the siege on Gaza. If it wants, it can allow people to live a bit better and so on. So this is the one state. And the two-state solution was defeated by the Judaization, the vast Judaization of the West Bank, which goes on, and under this current government is even accelerated and intensified. So I think it's ridiculous to continue and talk about a space that doesn't exist as a future space for a nation state or sovereign state. The second thing I would like to say about it is that, of course, nobody underestimates the difficulties in creating a joint state with millions of Israeli Jews who would not give up the privileges that they have, the control that they have, and so on. So I think probably even more important than talking about the vision of the future is far more important to rethink the language that we are using for what we are hoping would happen in Palestine. I think for too many years we were using the discourse, the language of peace, as if there are there's a paradigm of parity between two parts that only need a bit of prodding from the outside to make peace between themselves. And that's the basis of the two-state solution. I think we all realize that this is not true, that the Palestinians have been and are colonized by Israel. It's not a war between Israel and the Palestinians. It's a project of colonialism, and the Palestinians are trying, not very successfully, to wage an anti-colonialist war against that colonization. So we are looking for decolonization in the 21st century, which sounds a bit bizarre because people think that decolonization already happened, but it didn't happen in Palestine yet. And decolonization means only one thing, which is important for the time being, that unlike what happened in the last 50 years, the Palestinians have to lead the way into the post-colonial Israel and Palestine. The Palestinians should tell the Israelis how they view millions of Jews in a future political structure, rather than the Israelis telling the Palestinians where can they live and how can they live and if they can live at all. I think that's the kind of change that I believe in. And then I think as difficult as building a joint state would be, whether it would be a federated state or not, that doesn't matter. There will be the energy and the capacity to do it. But first of all, there needs to be an understanding of the existential danger that Palestinians are facing from a settler colonial project that has not ended its mission and is continuing to implement its policies because the West is silent and in many ways is supportive of this project of dispossession.
Ilan, we could go on for ages, but we've run out of time. And in fact, we've exceeded our time. It's been a huge privilege for us to hear you talk on these matters. And I'm very, very grateful to you for taking the time to join us tonight. Thank you very
much, Nick, and great success for the evening. And thank you, Colin, for inviting me, and all of you have a very successful evening. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ilan, and thanks, Nick, as well. I encourage all of you to go and look at more of Ilan's work. You can find a lot on YouTube, lots of talks he's given, and plenty of books and reading material. I think just before we move on, Nick, it would actually be great to hear maybe just a minute or so from you, if you're willing, about your recent experience in Gaza. I think just on a human level, people would find that really interesting, because I know in a few minutes we're going to hear about IMET's work in Gaza. Maybe you could just say a few things.
I would be delighted to. I've been going out to Gaza since 2012, initially for teaching, and that's still a major part of what I do, teaching medical students. I take a group of Oxford doctors out there and we teach usually final year medical students, but I've recently started going out with Medical Aid for Palestine to teach and carry out cancer surgery, minimally invasive surgery. And we went out to do that a week and a bit ago. We arrived on the Sunday, had 2 days of hard work. We saw some of the patients we were going to operate on, spent all day Monday operating, and then of course things changed in the early hours of Tuesday morning. we were confined to the hotel. The hospitals, for obvious reasons, stopped all elective surgery in preparation for the injured who were going to be coming in. And we had for us, certainly a unique insight into what they go through, and it brought forward many emotions, as you can imagine. We spoke to our medical friends regularly throughout the 4 days we were stuck there before we could be evacuated. I guess the most overriding sentiment we had was the, and some of these people I know from Gaza are on the call tonight. Mohammed and Inas Al Sharif, I know, are joining us, and they're from Gaza. And we got recurrent phone calls and messages from our Gazan friends, all really worried about us. And it seemed a bit surreal that their concerns were about us, because we were, we felt pretty safe. We knew we were going to get out. And of course, they aren't going to be able to get out, and they're still stuck there. So it gave us a unique insight into what they go through, and the difficulties patients have there in getting access, particularly to cancer treatments, cancer surgery, and it really reinforced to me and my colleagues that there is so much that can be done, that needs to be done, but so much that can be done if we can get better access to go and help and move forward like that. So it was a remarkable few days. As Colin's described, it's a quite remarkable place. The most wonderfully lovely people, which I think really was demonstrated by the continuing calls and messages. No care for themselves, but care for us who were stuck there. So I'd endorse what Colin said afterwards. They're the warmest and most lovely nation I think I've ever come across.
Well, thanks, Nick. That's really, really good to hear some of your insights. And also a big thank you to Ilan for being here with us this evening. So time is moving on, so we need to move to our next item. We're going to hear more about IMET's Gaza work in a minute. But for the moment, we have our next piece of music for you. And this is a Palestinian violinist, Mohammed Khalaf. He's based in Ramallah, and he's kindly sent us one of his videos to play this evening. So I hope you enjoy.
Hello everybody, in this video I'll play a medley of Palestinian folk songs. يا زرف الطول, وين عرم الله, and عالعين مليتين. Enjoy.
That was amazing. Colin mentioned earlier the importance of culture and the richness of Palestinian culture. So I hope you enjoy seeing all of these different pieces of music that we have and just showing that rich culture. So I would now like to invite Colin to come back, and he's going to say a few words about our Child Mental Health Centre in Gaza. And Colin, just to let you know, we have Mohammed El Sharif from the centre in Gaza on the call, if you want to say hello to him. And we also have Jane from Firefly on the call as well. Over to you, Colin.
Oh, very good. Wonderful to know that those two are on the call, because they're so important in this enterprise. I'm really proud to introduce this short report and video clips sent to us specifically for this event by the director of the Gaza Child Mental Health Centre, he's an exceptional guy, Mohammed El Sharif. He won't mind me saying that because it's true. IMET2000 has partnered two other UK charities, registered charities, Firefly International and Action for Child Trauma. You heard that Jane was on the, she's chairman of Firefly International, and the whole group are incredibly useful and happy to deal with. I've rarely met any group that I've enjoyed working with better. So to support Mohammed and his team of psychologists and psychiatrists dealing with many mental health disorders, but particularly with children with repetitive traumatic stress disorder, I don't talk in terms of PTSD anymore in Gaza, because these children are constantly exposed to fear and loss of family through frequent Israeli bombing, siege, and several full invasions. They're subjected to constant fear and to constant anxiety. And there's no such thing as post-traumatic stress in these children. Even though they're treated satisfactorily in 1 year, they could come back the next year needing more treatment of our experts. We're so impressed with the reports we get each month with detailed case studies that we hate to take on more staff and treat more children. We want to. The videos you will now see are the open days we hold for some 60 children with their parents or carers all day, a full 8 hours, I think it is, followed by a short piece in which thankful mums express their gratitude to Mohammed and his team. I hope you like these because it gives us a good impression, a good idea of what we are trying to achieve in Gaza.
السلام عليكم. بتقدم أنا بالشكر الجزيل اللي احتضننا واحتضن أبنائنا بعد الصدمات اللي احنا تعرضنا لها واللي بتعرض لها شعبنا بصورة مستمرة. كتير احنا مشكورين له لأنه قدم لنا خدمات كتيرة ودعم أبنائنا ودعمنا نفسيا، عامل على انه يخفف من حده هاي الازمات اللي احنا بنعدي فيها، والحمد لله هو اخذ بايدنا انه احنا نتعدى هاي الازمه واخرجنا يعني منها. وبنشكرهم كتير على هذا اليوم اللي هو اليوم المفتوح اللي حاول انه يضيف لحياتنا وليومنا شيء يعني من الانبساط، من الدعم النفسي اللي يطلعنا منها. فاحنا كتير مبسوطين ومشكورين هم كتير كمان، لانه احنا مش عارفين حتى نشكرهم باي صورة، لانه هم كتير قدموا لنا خدمات والحمد لله. يعني احنا بنشكرهم وبنتمنى انه هذا المركز كمان يتطور زيادة ويندعم ويكون له طريق يعني كمان اكثر، لانه احنا مجتمعنا وشعبنا متعرض دائما لهي الازمات وبحاجة لمراكز او بحاجه لهذا المركز انه يكون بصوره كمان. هو كثير الصوره اللي هو فيها كثير يعني جميله وكويسه، بس احنا كمان حابين يكون هو يتطور ويكون احسن من هيك كمان ويقدم خدمات احسن كمان. ومشكورين.
السلام عليكم. انا بشكر على الدعم اللي قدموه لنا ولاولادنا، واحنا مرينا بظروف كثير صعبه انا واولادي والحمد لله تخطيناها. الدعم النفسي اللي قدموا لنا اياه والاهتمام والاحتضان اللي احتضنونا اياه، انا بشكر كثير على الدعم اللي عملوا لنا اياه. والحمد لله احنا رحنا لهم بنفسيه كانت كثير تعبانه، مرينا كثير بظرف طارئ والحمد لله تعدينا وتخطيناه. وانا بشكرهم على اليوم الرائع هذا. احنا الحمد لله انبسطنا كثير فيه وبارك الله فيهم كلياتهم، كادرهم ما شاء الله يعني ما شاء الله، يعني لهم يعني حظ كبير في اللي احنا وصلنا له. شكرا كثير لهم وبارك الله فيهم.
أنا اسمي منى رمضان صالح. تعرضنا في الحرب الأخيرة لحالة صدمة، كانت الحرب يعني عبارة عن صدمة كبيرة، فتوجهنا الحمد لله للدعم النفسي والصحة النفسية، ونحن بنشكرهم على دعمهم لأطفالنا وخروجهم من الأزمات والمشاكل اللي بتعرضوا لها خلال الاعتداءات الإسرائيلية على الشعب الفلسطيني. وشكرا لما يقدمه لنا من دعم لرفع مستوى ومعنويات أطفال قطاع غزة.
أقدم رسالتي لمركز الصدمات النفسية باللغة الفرنسية. Je tiens à remercier le centre de traumatologie de l'enfant. Je te vrai de rif, te robe de l'extiadé. Mais Roger, visite le centre, je suis devenu plus fort, meilleur, tu remplacé, agréable. Merci de m'aider et d'aider les autres enfants. Je m'appelle Yusra, jamais français, j'ai 2 heures. Au revoir.
بسم الله. هو خير الكلام ما قل ودل. وإيش ما بدي أحكي عن المركز، إيش قدموا لأولادي، كيف كانوا يمروا من أحلام مزعجة، من أسلوب منحرف من كتر الخوف اللي جواتهم، كيف تغيروا خطوة كيف التكنيك كان يعطوني دافع يتحسنوا بصورة حلوة بشكل رائع. أنا بأشكر المركز صدمات النفسية بقدم المجهود وبذلوه مع أولادي، بشكرهم جدا وإيش ما بدي أحكي ما بوفي لهم. عن جد شكرا كثير على اليوم الرائع هذا.
احنا جايين اليوم كنا فعلا محتاجين لهيك يوم، مش يعني كنا كتير نفسيتنا تعبانة ومن الحرب ومن اللي صار ومن الشهداء واللي شفناه كله يعني والجرحى، وكنا فعلا احنا واطفالنا محتاجين لهذا اليوم المفتوح. وبنشكر كل اللي دعموا هذا اليوم لانه بجد كتير انبسطنا، كتير كان يوم رائع من كل شيء، يعني فقرات حلوة، رحلة حلوة، من أكل، من كل شيء مميز، فبنشكر كل العاملين فيه.
So we now need to move on. We are running a little bit over time, but I hope you'll all be able to stay with us for the last few segments that we have of the evening. Malik, it's time to hand over to you, and I think we have the next video to share.
Right, well, I don't know. I mean, I got very deeply touched by this video, but again, it's you and your support who's really helping us to put a smile on the faces of these young ones. Without any further ado, I'd like to thank Muhammad Al-Sharif and his team in Gaza for the hard work and above all, the persistence against all the odds and the difficulties. So thank you, Muhammad, and please extend our thanks to your colleagues in Gaza for all you do. Now I'm going to leave you with a recorded message, really, on behalf of the children of Palestine, sent to us by Ahmed, a brave boy from Ramallah. So let's listen to what he is going to say.
To my fellow children worldwide, my name is Ahmed, and I'm 10 years old. I'm a Palestinian boy living in Ramallah. Just like any other child, I have no interest in politics nor power, only in toys and fun. They have been stripped from me. My only crime being a Palestinian. I, along with thousands of other Palestinian children, have fallen victim to a conflict that is beyond our control, where our freedom, rights and childhoods have been removed from our lives, only to be replaced with our toys ripped and our families shattered. But despite this, I have hope. I dream for a bright future, where I can live like any other child, not waking up in fear every day, not hearing the cries of the imprisoned families, and not expecting the soldiers to break into the village at any moment. Today, you have a choice. You have a choice to turn a blind eye to this cause, or the choice and the ability to turn our lives full of misery and hurt into a life that isn't limited because of where I was born. A life like any other child, where I can live in happiness, peace, and with my own ambitions.
Right, well, thanks for Ahmed for this message, and I hope you would join me to send a message back to Ahmed to say, look, your voice and the voice of the children of Palestine have been heard in the UK. Certainly, they've been heard by many of us here on this call, and we will promise, and I promise myself that we will continue working for this humanitarian cause to relieve the kids in Palestine, but also in the rest of the world, which takes me really to the next section of our work. And this is our work now in Africa, where I'm going to hand over to Colin to introduce us to some of the work that our charity is leading in Africa. So over to you, Colin.
I'm sorry, we're running a bit over time, but I do just want to ask you to listen to a bit about what we're trying to do in Africa. I've been involved in Uganda since 1962, when I really loved Africa, loved going there and working there. And it was a great privilege to have the opportunity when I was only still a student at the university. But I'd like to just tell you now what we're trying to do. I want to show a short film made by our representative in Africa, who's Richard Field, who is married to a Ugandan and spends a lot of time out there and also loves it as much as I do, obviously. And I just want you to see this film to see what we're trying to do. With the help of three big charities, the Randall Foundation, the Paul Patrick Foundation, and the Alverscroft Trust, we've been able to set up a visual impairments service, which is serving a population of 600,000 in Bukola district. And actually people come for cataract operations from all over East and North Uganda. So we're actually swamped with numbers, but we're trying to do at least 20 a month. And I would love, if we had enough funding for it, I would love to pump that up to 40 a month, in which case we could do over 400 a year and keep going on, because the waiting list never dies. And there's about, I believe, 100,000 people who are blind or near blind in Uganda who can't afford an operation, which costs £650 there. That's 2 years' wages if in a $1 a day society. And we're doing it for free for them. It costs us £120 each. And it's dirt cheap. And to actually see these people able for the first time in their life to see their own children and their own siblings, and the joy that they feel of being able to see again is so moving. I can't bear to think of them spending the rest of their life blind. It's not right. And so I do ask you to help me, please. We want to do this. I'll show you the film now. Thank you.
I was lucky enough to be able to witness February's cataract camp at Harona Hospital. Patients started to arrive the day before their operations, led by their carers. Most of the patients were unable to move around without these dedicated members of their family. This is just two of the patients I spoke with before their operation.
netandikirawo mwezi gwa kutaano nenvayo mu kibuga kirira Helena netujja naye bwe najja tebanongose lyasooka nawulira essanyu nnyo okulabika nga naddamu okulaba enkomyewo banongose eryokubiri.
Amanya gange nze nengesa Alex. Mama wange namataka yaziba amaaso nagenda okula nga wede yaziba amaaso tawulira talaba banaamasira gamujja mu maitu kati tagenda kusomero tenasigala mbeerenga ne maama nasomayo katini nebanzijayo mbeere ne maama.
All the patients were tested ready for their operations and their eyes checked for one last time. On the day of surgery, Linda, an ophthalmic clinical officer and head of the eye department at Harona Hospital, makes sure all the patients are fully prepared for their operations. It was a real pleasure to meet Dr. Susan Chichira and watch her work. She meticulously worked on each patient one after the other with no let up, with the Ugandan music gently playing in the background. The next day, all the patients are gathered outside the eye clinic for their moment of truth, removing their eye patch and seeing if they have their vision back. But first, they're told how to look after their eye post-op. This man has learning difficulties and couldn't read the eye chart, and he didn't know the colour of Linda's t-shirt, so she asked him who he was with, and he replied his sister. Then she pointed to me and he looked across at me for the first time, and she said, "Who is this?" And he said, "Mzungu." Mzungu means white man, which was a big relief and made us all laugh. This man had lost his left eye and had a cataract in his right eye.
That is all.
This man was reading the eye chart very well until suddenly he was having difficulty reading the letters, and then his carer pointed out that Linda had moved her finger from pointing to the larger letters to the very small letters on the bottom. It was a big relief.
You're pointing at the letter down there.
Hey, this one.
That is A.
I did not that I was fighting with the same guys.
You're fighting with letters down, which are very tiny.
Your A, your X, your 0, your H, your P, your T, your U.
X, S, U, V, O, T.
And this is a moment where Mary saw her eldest daughter for the first time in 12 years. 2 weeks later, Mary came back and walked in and out of the eye clinic unassisted. It was a moment to remember.
Wow. That's amazing.
That independence.
That's amazing.
And you can walk by yourself. That's amazing.
Really amazing.
Without IMET2000 and your support, none of this would be possible. Having met these wonderful people and shared their stories and their joy, and seeing so many lives change overnight, I only hope that IMET2000 are able to continue this fantastic work.
In Uganda, we have about 40 active ophthalmologists, but our cataract surgery rate is still very low, so we have a backlog of more than 100,000 cataracts, which increase with every year.
With so many more people in Uganda like these who need your help, please support IMET2000, Verona Hospital and Dr. Susan Chichira to help give these people back their sight.
I'd just like to say thank you to the supporters of IMET2000, particularly those who have supported the cataract operations. It's a relatively straightforward operation that lasts 15 minutes and changes people's lives overnight. And not just those who haven't been able to see for sometimes many years, but also the carers and the people who looked after them, such as Mary's daughter who never went to school. So I really hope that we can get the support and these operations can continue and we can carry on helping as many people as possible. Thank you. I'm so sorry, because I lost my Zoom for a couple of minutes. I didn't really say what I wanted to say about this hospital itself. It was set up with the help of Richard Field, who I hope will pop his head in the door in a moment. And you'll see he virtually runs his life around this hospital called Verona Hospital. But I wanted to pay tribute to the director, whose dream it was right from the beginning. We started supporting this Verona Hospital and him, Dr. Mukalazi, an extraordinary man and very dedicated to his people. Again, another champion of the local people. And I just wanted to say, emphasize that he is serving a hospital, a 50-bed hospital now, which didn't have foundations even in May 2017. We started from scratch, and he is responsible, not us, for building it up until it's a 50-bed equivalent of a local district hospital now, certainly a cottage hospital or bigger. And I think it's an extraordinary thing that he and Richard have achieved between them. I just wanted to throw that in. I know we're running late, but I couldn't let myself get away with not paying tribute to these people because they're quite remarkable. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. It's now time, Colin, for you and Malik and Mark to come back on screen, and it's an opportunity for you to describe the 7 projects that we're raising money for this evening. So I know you'll go into them in more detail, but 5 of the projects are for Palestine, 1 is for the Syrian-Turkey earthquake, and 1 is for the hospital that you've just heard about in Uganda. So Colin and Malik and Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Charles. Thank you. I was wondering if Jojo would be able to share with us a slide which kind of summarizes the 5 projects in Palestine. So I don't know how we're going to do it between Colin, Mark, and myself, but I thought if with their permission, I might go ahead and start by just outlining the projects we are fundraising for tonight. We have 5 projects for Palestine. 3 would come under the theme of child mental health. And the other 2 is a new theme, which we are getting involved with. So to start with the child mental health, or like mental health, we are seeking support for project 1, which is the child mental health program in Palestine, which you've seen the clips. This involves providing treatment for children who are victims of war, who are struggling with cognitive and learning disabilities, but also with physical disabilities. These children are unable to attend their treatment sessions. They don't have even the money to pay for the travel. So we cover the treatment for the whole year to come regularly and attend their treatment sessions. And this is on the West Bank side, but obviously working with with our partners in Gaza. As you have seen from the video, we are offering treatment, really latest and up-to-date treatment to those who suffer trauma after war. So we seek your support for Project 1, both in Gaza and the West Bank. I'll move quickly on to Project 2. This is, we are going to work with Jasmine Society, help them expand to serve the community in the villages around Jerusalem. And I mean here in East Jerusalem. And this is really an area of villages which kind of lie on the borders. And you feel sometimes nobody is in charge, although I know that the Palestinian Ministry of Health, they're trying their best to help. But quite often, because of the conflict and because of everything going on, these families and the children who live in these rural areas around Jerusalem, they get disadvantaged. So Jasmine Society is expanding, opening branches to serve those communities. And they have asked us to support them in establishing a sensory room in one of their centers. And we seek your support and help to help them expand for the benefits of these families and their kids in those areas. Last but not least, on the front of mental health, we have been training residents to become the first psychiatrists to come to Palestine with that level of training. But we want to expand on that and get at least one, if not more, of them to become a child mental health specialist. So one of them, he's in the call with us, Uma, is at the cusp of sitting his board exams, completing his training as a general psychiatrist. But we are working with Dr. Hassanein Tayyar and his colleagues in the Real College of Psychiatry in the UK to organize for Uma a fellowship in child mental health. Obviously, this will cost us like some money to cover for his living expenses and accommodation when he comes along for a year or two, and we seek your support for this. Now, for the last 2 projects, really 4 and 5, they're both related. This is a new area which we are entertaining as I have returned to Palestine, where we are really trying here to promote mutual understanding with UK and Palestinian academic institutions. Now, with me being the dean at the Arab American University here in Jenin, I am working very closely with Colin, with other colleagues in the UK, with Nick Menard in Oxford, to develop a mutual and memoranda of understanding, where we hope really to bring the vision that Colin had really all along of that revolving door, where we can exchange expertise, we can exchange knowledge between the United Kingdom and Palestine. So this year, really this summer, we are hoping to send 40 students, 20 to Dundee, 20 to Oxford, and to again gain some training, gain some experience, and come back here and kind of pass on their experience and knowledge. And also we are seeking fund to support and help those who come from Bedouin communities and also from the camps and the less privileged families, to help them complete their medical studies. This is everything I wanted to say, and I will leave Colin and Mark to chip in as they wish. But I thought this will be a quick summary of the 5 projects we have in Palestine. We can stop sharing the slide, Juju, if you don't mind, and I'll hand over to Colin and Mark.
One of the things and thank you, Malik, that was brilliant. And you know, we all praise Colin, but you're bloody marvelous. You really are, and thank you. It's a real genuine honor and a privilege to be alongside the pair of you, despite me being so rude.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Mark.
I think one of the really interesting things about this work is this: these are the most vulnerable people, children exposed to conflict, and the poorest, most oppressed sections of the Bedouin people have zero rights, less than zero. You know, you are talking about communities that are constantly turned off their land, you know, and constantly have water and electricity and, you know, infrastructure used against them, the denial of which to create some form of stable communities, and they still survive. And what this does is it helps them thrive. That's the first thing. The second thing, I think this is one of the most impressive things about these projects. This is pioneering work. This is proper pioneering work for child mental health in the West Bank and in Gaza. This is absolutely leading the way. And that's why we need your support. Because I remember once, I don't know whether I told you the story, Malik, when we were doing one of the boat gigs. Do you remember that we did the gigs on the, Colin got his Jolly Jack Tar Tums to let us have the boat. And I was helping set up some of the artwork we were going to auction off. And they'd had, the boat is a kind of, it's like a sailor's club, isn't it, Colin? That sounded bad, but do you know what I mean? It's like a dining club for people who've been in the forces and all of that. And I was setting up some things, and one of the blokes had been obviously for dinner for some naval reunion or something. And he comes up to me and he said, "Oh, Mark, you're Mark to us." I said, "Yeah." He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "We're doing a fundraiser tonight for Palestinian child mental health." And he said, "Well, that makes sense, Mark, because if you're near something that goes bang, that will stay with you." And I thought that's the simplest way of explaining what it is.
It's very true. Very true. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mark. That's, as usual, very, very supportive. I'm not going to spend long now because I've already talked at length. I was going to talk at more length about the Uganda cataract problems, but I think I've said enough about that already. I do want to go on to the last thing we were raising funds for, is for the earthquake tragedy in Turkey and Syria, because we've joined as junior partners really with this wonderful organization called Firefly International, which have been running a program of education for children in Turkey, refugee camps, and these are all Syrian refugee children, both in Turkey and in Idlib along the border on the inside. And of course, they've been seriously damaged by the earthquake, and we've virtually got to start all over again. And what IMET is particularly keen on, keen on what Firefly is doing generally and want to continue doing, but what we're particularly keen on is supporting the main director, who's Mrs. Fadia Shaker, another champion that we're supporting. I mean, we just have to get people who are top-rate, top-class people running the show themselves and not dominate with the Western British running things. We've got to, and also Ed Craze, who's the business manager, they both got out of the rubble. Fadia with her family, fortunately, had 3 children and a husband, were dragged out and uninjured, and Ayak got out with a broken arm. We lost one of our teachers, unfortunately died in the rubble, but very few of the children, because so many of the children, we teach hundreds, and some with special needs, and I guess now after the earthquake, a lot more with special needs, which we're particularly interested in, survived because they're along the Syrian border and there's not these great tower blocks which came tumbling down. So I do commend that to you as well. We've raised quite a lot of money already from very generous donors, but I would like to raise some more tonight. And we put it through Firefly International, and they donate it or run people out there like Fadia and pay for them and support them. I say run, I don't mean that. We support them. So I would hope you can help us with that one too. Thank you. Right, I think we're running over time.
I think so, yeah.
Thank you, Mark, for your help.
Thank
I
you,
think
Mark.
we
Thank
better
you.
have
So
back to Charles quickly before we run out of all time.
Thanks, Colin. I will now, so as we little time left, hand over to Nick to say some final words to wrap up the evening.
Thank you, Charles. I really won't take up much time at all. As everyone knows, the role of trustees of a charity is to provide oversight of that charity and really to be responsible for making sure it's doing what it's meant to do. And I'm sure you'll understand that actually that's not very difficult with IMET. And most of the time we as a board simply sit back and watch in awe at what Colin, Malik and Harriet do. Words can't really do it justice. It's a massive privilege to be involved with this unique charity, which does so much for Palestine, which is clearly dear to my heart, but also in Ukraine, Africa and Asia. I'd like to say a few thank yous to Charles, who, as always, has brilliantly compared the evening and despite all of our attempts to overrun, has heroically kept us largely to time. So thank you, Charles. You've done yet again a brilliant job. To Malik, I don't think any words can do justice what Malik does. You've heard it all, as Mark has just said. How he does it all, I don't know, but he is heroic and does really quite tremendous things for this charity. Thank you to Jojo, Malik's son, who is the king of IT for IMET and has enabled this meeting to run so well on Zoom. Thank you to Harriet, who of course does a huge amount of work behind the scenes in enabling this, and really IMET almost certainly wouldn't be running without her, so thank you, Harriet. To all our speakers tonight, His Excellency Dr. Hussam Zomlot, Sir Vincent Feen, Mark, of course, Omid, and of course Ilan Pape, and thank you for your wonderful contributions. We know you do it because you're passionate about Palestine and what this wonderful charity does, but we also know that whenever Colin comes calling, none of you has any chance whatsoever to say no. Firstly, because he's so persuasive, but also because you all love him so much. And that really brings me to finishing off by talking just a few words about, I always describe Colin as heroic, but he is, of course, heroic. He's the founder, director of overseas development and treasurer of this wonderful society, charity, but he's also an inspiration to all of us. And you've only had to have seen him tonight to realize how much this means to him and what a truly, truly wonderful and heroic job he does. So can we take us off mute for a second, just so he can hear our applause, please, Charles?
Yeah.
And finally, I just like to thank all of you who've joined.
Nick, if you can just unmute yourself again.
Sorry. So I'd just like to finally thank everyone who's joined tonight. IMET does so well because of your generosity and digging deep into your pocket. So you can donate anytime you like. You can certainly donate after the event is closed. So please do continue to donate and support this truly, truly unique and inspirational charity. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks so much, Nick, for those final words. It's my role just to wrap up, and I'm going to put the Just Giving link in the chat again. I'm also going to put the email there. So if you haven't had a chance to already, please do check out that Just Giving page. Also, you can email IMET's email address, and please address that to either Harriet or Colin. If you want to donate to a specific project, you can do so by emailing. And thank you everyone once again. I know you've heard lots of thanks, but thank you so much for being here. I know we've run over a little bit, but it's been a wonderful evening. I hope you've been inspired, and it's been very uplifting. And on that note, I want to leave you with a final little bit of uplifting music. You can see it's about to play here, but I'll just introduce it. This is from an amazing charity in Uganda. They're called the Masaka Kids Africana. And the charity sponsors orphan children who've gone through some extremely difficult experiences. But through dance and song, they try and find hope, and they do all sorts of amazing stuff. And they train these kids extremely well in dance. I very much recommend checking them out on YouTube or on Instagram after we finish. So I hope you enjoy, and thank you very much for being with us this evening.
Jerusalema ikayalami ilondoloze uhambe nami zungangishilana. Jerusalema ikayalami ilondoloze uhambe nami zungangishilana. Dawo yami ayikholana, buso wami awukholana. Ilondoloze zuhambe nami. Dawo yami ayikholana, buso wami awukholana. Jerusalema ikayalami ilondoloze uhambe nami zungangishilana. Jerusalema ikayalami ilondoloze uhambe nami zungangishilana. Dawo yami ayikholana, buso wami awukholana. Ilondoloze zuhambe nami. Dawo yami ayikholana, buso wami awukholana.